So hello, everybody. This is my sex bio here. We are today with Dr. Mitchell Tepper. He is a sexuality educator and coach, and he is dedicated to helping people with disabilities and health professionals grasp the full potential of sexual response and expression post-injury or illness. We are here with him today to talk about Tantra, which is something that is core to his work and that he has been working with for a long time. So thank you, Dr. Tepper, for being here. And well, I hope that this conversation gives us a lot of insights for maybe even starters, people who have never heard of Tantra, or people that are looking to just actually start or are already starting into it. Thank you so much. How are you?
Great. Thank you for having me.
We were thinking we were going to start by just asking you to define Tantra. Maybe if you were asked to define Tantra in a sentence or two, how would you define it? What would you say Tantra is?
I usually start by saying what Tantra isn't. So Tantra isn't a religion, right? So you'll find people who say they are goddesses, right? And we talk about worship and sacred sex. So something could be sacred, but it doesn't have to be a religion. So number one, it's not a religion. It's consistent with any religion you practice. It's not, there's no conflict between practicing Tantra and practicing any religion of your choice. So it's not a religion. And what it also is, it's actually in its essence, it's not a sexual practice, right? So we think about tantric sex. Tantra is a way of life. It's a way of life that promotes a deep awareness, right? Deep mindfulness, being in the moment, and important to people with disabilities and illness, but everybody in this society. It promotes deep acceptance of who you are as a person, right? You are natural, you are born, and we're natural, and also sex is natural. Sex isn't a good thing or a bad thing, right? So a lot of people carry sexual shame or guilt, or after a disability, they're attached to what sex meant for them or what it was like for them before. But with the tantric perspective, there's unattachment, there's acceptance. And as people with disabilities, as people with chronic conditions, as people whose gender expression may be different than the norm, whose orientation may be different, it fosters acceptance, deep acceptance of who we are. And through that, and through taking everything as natural, we can transform, basically grow into our best potential.
Maybe there I'd like to expand a little bit, because you're talking about how, like, what Tantra requires from you, right? So like where it takes you, right? And then I think sometimes for many people, and especially people struggling maybe with mental health issues, this part of saying, like being in the moment, being present, accepting myself, these things sound difficult to do. So I don't know if, like, in your experience, or, like maybe from your own personal journey, or from what you've learned, like how can people, just approach this in a way that becomes a little bit more accessible, if that sounds like a huge thing for somebody to do?
Well, what I teach actually is accessible Tantra, right? And this is accessible for everybody. So in the case, I'll start with a physical disability or chronic physical condition before I go to a mental or psychological struggle. To fight the fact, I was an able-bodied person 40 years ago. I was a lifeguard, a springboard diver. I did karate, right? And when I broke my neck, I lost the ability to do those things in the way I used to do them. It is pointless for me to dwell on the past and to dwell on what I used to be able to do. As long as I dwell on that and compare and feel sorry for myself because I can't move on, I can't grow as who I am, right? So now let's say I have depression, right? And we'll talk about clinical depression, not I'm just down, I'm just blue. I have clinical depression, right? if I beat myself up because I have depression,
Yeah.
right, it's going to make me more depressed. If I could accept the fact that I have depression, if I accept the fact that it's a medical condition, if I accept the fact that I'm doing whatever I can to manage my depression, then, and I'm not afraid to share with my intimate partners that I have depression, right? Then life becomes easier. We are working from a place of where we are. That doesn't mean I wish I didn't have depression, right? So acceptance doesn't mean I wish things weren't different. It doesn't mean I wish I could walk. It doesn't mean I wish I didn't have to deal with this. I wish I didn't have to take medication. It doesn't mean any of those things, right? It means I'm not going to feel ashamed because of my mental illness or my depression or my, anxiety disorder. I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I'm going to accept it. When I accept it, if I want to feel better, if there are things I can do, if I want to take medication, I will. If I don't like the effect of the medication on my creativity or whatever, or on my weight, then I won't. But to accept yourself as you are, because we can't change that in the moment, right? We could grow from where we are, but only through acceptance, not through fighting, not through guilt, not through shame.
That's true. I like to, because you've been working with Tantra for so much time already. You've read so many books, you're so informed about these things. I would like to know a little bit about, like the history of Tantra and how, because it's also, and maybe let me give you a little bit of context of why I ask this, is because our history is full of a lot of moments where, the people who are in power took some beliefs, changed them, completely erased them. So I think it's important to take a moment to talk about that. And then I like to know, maybe why can you tell us a little bit about the history of Tantra, and then maybe how that changed when it was brought to the West, and maybe where things were lost in the middle of that.
Well, things are actually lost in the East too. So
yeah.
So the history, so Tantra, let's say it's between 3,000 and 5,000 years old, right? And whether you look at it in being in India or Nepal, or in, maybe in China, right? Or maybe all of the above, it's an Eastern philosophy. If you go to India now today, and I haven't been there since 2006, but I understand from other people in India doing sexuality education, sexuality education is almost non-existent, and sexuality is not embraced as something positive or natural. And that is a result of really Christian values being imposed on the country, right? And so even in India today, from what I hear from my friends who live in India, there is not a tantric perspective when it comes to sex, right? Because of all the negativity and shame. So we have an old philosophy, right? We also have the same kind of Tibetan roots are for mindfulness, right? So we accept mindfulness this day as a widely accepted psychological practice, right? Every article is about mindfulness. We use it. I used to work, within the Veterans Administration system, and mindfulness was accepted as an evidence-based practice. So things have to go through a high bar of evidence-based in order to be used at the VA. So mindfulness is used there, and then you could find all kinds of mindfulness acts. And yoga, although if we look at the history of yoga and Tantra from a philosophical perspective, they're somewhat opposite, because in Tantra, you're accepting, and especially around sexuality, and in yoga, you're trying to change. You're fighting nature as I understand the philosophy of yoga. Now, yoga in the way it's practiced today, at least where I practice, the teacher preaches that yoga is a breath practice. So I focus on mindfulness and yoga as a breath practice when we get into skills for Tantra. But getting to the history of Tantra, when it was brought to the West, and that's not just the United States, but also Europe, right? Sex in Tantra is a vehicle for transformation. It is not Tantra. Western images of Tantra are a sexual practice. And with that sexual practice, there's all kinds of things. And all of that may be fun, right? Or interesting, or you might be curious. But I teach accessible Tantra. I teach just the mindset, because once again, pleasure and orgasm is a brain-mediated event. Having a negative mindset, being filled with shame and guilt, thinking, negative things about sex can affect your sexual response, your pleasure, and your orgasmic response. So, I don't believe that when a couple gets together, so we talk about couple sex, right, that there needs to be a lot of physicality that you're thinking about, right? So there's nice positions you could get in. So you could go face to face or eye gaze, or, you could, embrace your partner in certain ways. So there are some lovely positions for connection during that. But what's important is, the essence. And when I'm teaching folks, I talk about these three things: stop, focus, and connect. So in stopping, we have to slow everything down, right? People want to quick, get in, get out, get off, right? So we want to slow things down. We want to slow things down physical, but we want to slow things down in our brain. If we're thinking, oh, do I smell? How do I look to my partner? Am I going to be able to last long enough? Am I going to be wet enough? Whatever. We have to slow all that thing down, and that we could use our breath to come into the moment, and then to, focus, right? So one thing we haven't two words I don't think I used yet. So when we talk about focus, we're talking about setting an intention, right? So set an intention for pleasure or whatever the intention is, but set, a positive intention for that engagement. You may want to verbalize that. You may want to communicate that to each other. I'm looking forward to a real fun time with you. I'm really looking forward to having some hot sex with you. Set an intention and then pay attention. Pay attention to what's going on in your own body for your own pleasure and physiologically. So many men, in this culture, they're paying attention to their partner, thinking that they have to perform and get their partner off. And
that's true.
Right? So when you're doing all of that, you're not focusing on your own pleasure, right? It sounds counterintuitive, but the partner knows you're putting on a performance for them.
Yeah.
And, it works when both people's sexual response is strong and good, so there's strong desire and you hook up with somebody, it could work, that's not like just going at it. It's like, doesn't work for people, right? We're talking about quality sex over a long term, or a hookup that's longer and richer than a wham bam thank you ma'am. So we have to set a positive intention. We have to pay attention to what's going on in our own bodies, right? And in what's going on with your partner. So you want to be there for your partner. You want to tune into what's going on for yourself. So if you're uncomfortable, you don't just lie there and bear it in pain, while your partner's doing something you don't like. Excuse me, I'm feeling a little pain. Let's change position. Let's do it slower. Let's do it differently, right? So, and then to connect, right? We use our eyes, if we can see, to connect. We use our breath to connect. We use touch to connect, right? So stop, slow things down, focus, have a positive intention, pay attention to what's going on. And that's where breathing and yoga helps the practice of that and connect in any way you want. It could be connecting over, writing erotica to each other, sexting, could be online. It doesn't have to be in person. So that's what I think, the skill-based component, those are the skills. And I say that people should just get a mindfulness app, because there's not, like I said in the beginning, there are people who say, I don't see many Tantra gods there, but there are male men. There are plenty of men Tantra teachers, but there's this whole culture of goddesses and a lot of stuff. Usually they're very expensive, the time they charge. So we don't have to go there. We could just, stay with these, stop, focus, and connect. And I think this will improve a lot of people's sexual experiences, not just people with disabilities or chronic conditions or mental health issues.
Yeah, that's true. Because I think, and then maybe some of this could sound like it's just maybe some sort of groundbreaking stuff, but it isn't really, because like I think everybody, and if you go online, you see it, all this type of jokes of how women are always making the list of the to-do list in their minds while they're at it with their partners and things like that. And I think to that point, it's also important to just like normalize talking about sex in general. And I think it's a good moment to just, underline that, because you just said it, right? Like you're not going to stay there and stand something you're not enjoying, right? So I think our culture in general needs to be more open to, like just having this bits of words when you say, hey, let's change. I'm not feeling well, and this type of thing. I also like what you said about this performance and how you said, when your partner is putting the performance up. And I think it's very interesting, because it also like, it just, it's a little bit contradictory even, because you would think that if you're focusing on getting your partner there, that's just, that's going to help you get them there. But then as they know that you are putting up that performance, you might even also, because you're not focusing in the moment, you're missing the cues that they might given you with their body saying what they actually need, instead of just like, like I'm not, and usually, and this is another thing I think that also tantric sex is bringing up, as opposed to just like quote unquote regular sex, is the focus of regular sex usually, in the media everywhere where we learn it, is just getting there, right? And then Tantra is telling us differently, like, okay, we can, focus on maybe connecting and pausing. And I think that is all very valuable, as you said, for everybody. But it just made me think how evident it is that, and how contradictory it is that when you're trying to focus on that, because you're so, you're focusing on the product, but not on the result, on the end product, and not on the process.
Right.
And I think that, that relates to life in general. Like, it's not even about sex. I think we tend to go about it in life.
So if you are, if you practice Tantra as a way of life, then you will approach your work that way, right? And you will approach, other aspects of life that way. So it's really like I said, it's a philosophy, it's an orientation as far as a way of life. And then you take it and you apply it to a sexual relationship or sexual activity. We call it a sexual relationship, whether it's with yourself or someone else.
I remember when I was watching this other video that you mentioned, so there are two things I'm curious about. You mentioned chakras in that video, and you also mentioned, you have been talking about it, like sexual energy in general. So I think that's, it's interesting when you talk about like solo practices, how just, like to learn to just probably listen, spot that sexual energy within yourself, move it around, all that. And then also how chakras, do they play, what is their role in here? Like, are they part of Tantra or are they not?
So getting into, Tantra as an energy practice, right? And I was saying that we all have an energy body. As I said, we are sexual energy is the life force, right?
Yep.
We're born through sex, and this is part of who we are. And then we also have an energy body, or Ray Stubbs calls a light body, right? And it exists even when we lose our limbs, right? So, and I, give an example of shaking the hands and stop. And you could feel the vibrations, and you could feel beyond your body. And when you put your hands together, you could feel the warmth. What is that? What is warmth but energy, fire, right? And once you learn to identify your own energy and feel it, sometimes you got to get real close without touching. But once you got it, then you could learn to play with it, stretch it, move it, and so sex becomes movement of energy, and breath moves energy, sound moves energy, vibration moves energy,
Totally.
right? And then it becomes moving energy and exchanging energy with a partner. And that's where distance isn't an issue when we're like this, right? We could exchange energy without even being in the same room. So that's where I call this like a more energetic model versus a friction model. There is no physicality required for energetic sex. At night, when I go to sleep, I breathe through my chakras every night. I do a yoga nidra. I just do this like little meditation. And as I do it and I focus on my breath, then I get into my breath, then I do a breathing exercise that takes me through my chakras. And I'm usually asleep by the time I finish, thank goodness. But so people can learn to cultivate their energy. They could learn about, so, reading about Tantra, and reading books and practicing along with some of the guides. It's unbelievable that actually everyone wants to give. Everyone wants to please their partner,
That is
right?
so true.
Or
Yeah.
get their partner off, right?
Yeah,
People are not very good at receiving, right?
totally
So
true.
they're like, someone's pleasing you and you feel like, oh, you have to please them back. So in Tantra, you could take turns. You could practice receiving and you could practice giving. Orgasms don't have to be mutual, simultaneous, they don't have to be at all. So let's close with this. I tell people, you don't have to break your neck to be a great lover, but you could learn a lot from somebody who has. So when we are forced to learn about sex, right? So when I broke my neck, it was either I was going to accept that I'm not functioning the same and give up, or I'm going to try to figure out why does this happen and not that. It sent me on a journey of exploration. I was curious about my own responses. I read the books I read that turned me off. I discounted. They didn't speak to me, right? And then I found the book on Tantra. It spoke to me. So I kept learning and learning and learning to the point of getting a PhD in human sexuality. So I just took it to a different level. So you don't have to break your neck to be a great lover, but you can from someone who has, or someone with a disability. Anyone with a disability has learned to overcome societal stigma and let go of restrictive notions of sexuality and restrictive notions of orgasm that are pushed on us by the media and people trying to sell us things.
There is nothing to say about that. Like, yes,
All right.
yes, yes, yes.